911. What are you reporting?
We got something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal?
I can't tell.
He is known to rip people apart if he gets a chance.
What do you think they ought to do about him?
Kill him. He might hurt somebody.
It was walking very much like a human.
What's going on now, sir?
Son of a is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
Get somebody out here.
This is a cast of the lower jaw of what we call the Gigantopithecus.
In this region, the caves have produced teeth of a primate, Gigantopithecus, which may have gone extinct as recently as 10,000 years ago. That was just a bit too much like us for our own comfort.
It's a fair presumption that this was an erect bipedal animal, standing perhaps 8 feet tall, weighing about 800 pounds, and being presumably covered with hair. And this, of course, is an exact description of the living Sasquatch.
In his 1893 book, The Wilderness Hunter, President Theodore Roosevelt wrote of two trappers who were reportedly stalked, and one of them killed, by a tall bipedal creature with a strong wild beast odor. Some believe it was the first written account of Bigfoot killing a human.
I want to talk to you about something that some would say is fictional, but you would say, hold up, we don't know for certain, and that's Bigfoot.
Everybody talks to me about. I'm romantic. I would like Bigfoot to exist. I've met people who swear they've seen Bigfoot. And I think the interesting thing is every single continent, there is an equivalent of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. There's the Yeti, there's the Yari in Australia, there's the Chinese wild man, and on and on and on. And, you know, I've had stories from people who, you have to believe them. So there's something, I don't know what it is. I'm always open-minded.
One type of evidence in abundance is footprints. Casts of alleged Sasquatch footprints have been made from impressions all over the world. These prints provide experts with a well-known clue.
I was coming down north on this road here, and I heard some noise screaming back in here. And the noise that was coming from that creature is what was on the recorder here.
We saw it coming up over that ridge up there. It made the most horrible sound I'd ever heard in my life.
A community off northern Vancouver Island is at the center of an eerie mystery. People in Alert Bay say they've been hearing strange screams and howls from the forest at night. And the legend of the Sasquatch runs deep in their First Nations culture. As CTV's Gord Kurbis reports, some are now wondering if those legends are real.
It's an eerie recording captured on a cell phone of something that's making strange howling noises heard throughout Alert Bay.
We heard it once, and I didn't get the recording. And then second time, I got the recording. And that's, I was on the back porch. Very eerie.
The audio was recorded just recently on the backside of Cormorant Island. It's been heard by many all over the island.
This summer, I've heard it 3 times. I've heard it scream 3 times. But it's been coming here for years.
Whatever's been making the noise is heard primarily at night. Some say it's a dog, but others say that's impossible.
With that volume, absolutely nothing. No dog can make that kind of a noise with that volume.
Art Dick hears the vocalizations just outside of his home. He's convinced the calls are from a Sasquatch. He believes the creature is real because of several previous encounters, like several years ago on a remote island further south when a tree was thrown at himself and fellow clam diggers.
Pulled the tree right out of the ground. The branches were still on it. I don't know anything that can just literally pull a tree with roots and all. I mean, you know, you see that little alder growing out there. You try to go and pull it out, you're not going to be able to do it.
While the howls and screams that have been heard throughout Alert Bay could be dismissed as simply animal noises, you have to keep in mind that Cormorant Island is a location where there is no wildlife. There's no bears, no cougars, not even any deer. And while you could dismiss the noises, there have been plenty of sightings.
One person that's seen it, her father lives in Alert Bay, and she came up to visit her father. So she went up to the graveyard to pay respects to one of her family. And when she went up to the graveyard, she seen it standing there. She turned around and she got out of there right away. She didn't even go to the graveyard.
And a more recent sighting when a group of teens were playing soccer near the band's big house. A large upright creature moved quickly alongside the building in just a few strides.
Yeah, they took off right away. They don't even stay there anymore after the dark.
Oh my God.
He and his wife and grandson first heard that howl when they were walking back to their car at the end of the trail along the Vermilion River, about 45 minutes from the town of Sioux Lookout. Initially, Mikas thought it was a moose or a bear, but the experienced hunter quickly realized that it was a sound he's not familiar with. Mikas posted 2 videos on YouTube where they have since gone viral, racking up 2 million views. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, a wolf, Mikas says we may never know.
It seems to me that the footprints constitute the largest and most consistent body of data bearing on this question. And as such, they really deserve a concerted, systematic evaluation. In instances where we have successive footprints in a given trackway, I've been able to note flexion and extension of the toes, variation in toe position, and interaction of the foot with substrate under varying conditions. I'll also be looking for dynamic signatures that show this is a living footprint as opposed to something static. In this instance, we have the good fortune of a pair of tracks that are successive in a single trackway. And by comparing then the shapes and conformation of the toes, we can say a lot. For example, here, not only are the toe pads differing in dimensions, although clearly the same foot, even the toe spread is distinct from one footprint to the other. We're looking very closely at the surface of the footprint to see if there are any latent features, skin detail or skin ridge patterns that show up in the track. We'll be looking for landmark features that indicate the points of jointedness, where the foot bones articulate with one another and how they interact to form a functional unit. The overall appearance of the footprint can also be used to compare tracings from one location to another to see if there are repeat appearances of an identifiable individual. And this overall picture will help us to assess the function and compare that to models of human foot function as well as non-human primates and even fossil hominid tracks of early bipedal human ancestors.
But what if an animal that left a set of alleged Sasquatch footprints was also filmed? Can the 2 pieces of evidence be linked together to mutually strengthen the case for authenticity? This exact scenario happened in 1967. Steindorf's 3D modeling of the figure in the Patterson footage is now complete. The animation will be sent to Dr. Meldrum in Idaho, enabling a first-time glimpse of the Patterson creature from almost any point of view.
With this animation now, I'll be able to not only visualize, but more importantly, quantify aspects of this peculiar bent-kneed gait on a flexible flat foot. I've also noticed right away that there's an interesting rotation of the leg and foot that's not typical of a modern human gait. If this is in fact a real animal, this unusual combination of characteristics is going to give some important insights into the evolutionary history of bipedalism. In fact, it very well may challenge some of the preconceptions that we have. These features correlate, in fact, with the very types of adaptations that we would expect of a biped that's living in rugged, mountainous forests.
For additional opinions on these anatomical perspectives, Dr. Meldrum consults with Andrew Nelson of the Center for Motion Analysis and Biomechanics at Idaho State University. Nelson is able to view the Patterson figure from yet another specialized perspective. While studying the Patterson footage, a large visible bulge is seen on the leg of the subject.
Right there, stop there, and you can actually go one frame forward.
While inconclusive, it does in fact raise additional questions about how a fake monkey suit could be constructed with such detail over 35 years ago.
It could be some sort of traumatic pathology, a rupture of the IT or iliotibial band, allowing the underlying muscle to selectively bulge through in that area.
First of all, I would say that would be characteristic of at least a partial rupture of part of the quadriceps. There's also the IT band or the iliotibial band that runs through the area also. A creature that would have that type of a rupture would certainly have compromised gait of some sort.
Working together from fresh scientific perspectives, Meldrum, Nelson, and other scientists will be able to form new scientifically supportable conclusions about this footage.
While Renee is out camping, Matt, Bobo, and I are on our way to meet with Dr. Jeff Meldrum in his lab at Idaho State University. Dr. Meldrum's specialization is human bipedalism, walking on two legs, and the evolution that led up to that. That makes him especially qualified to look at Sasquatch footprints because they're the other, or an other, bipedal primate that lives on planet Earth today. I've been salivating to get in Jeff's lab for a long time now.
He's got more footprint casts than anyone, so when people say, oh, there's no physical evidence for these animals, I say, well, Jeff Meldrum's lab is full of physical evidence. I'm looking forward to meeting with Dr. Meldrum because he's already seen the videotape and he's interviewed the young guys who got the footage at the scene of the incident. He believes that what we're looking at in this footage really is a Sasquatch. Well, I want to know, in his academic opinion, what is it that makes him think it is a Sasquatch?
Okay, so here's the clip.
There is a frame right there. I mean, you clearly see the arm. And right there is where it glances back through the gap. Just ever so slightly. It's hard to tell because, of course, it's very dark. But there's that heavy shoulder and that swing of the arm. I took a clip from the Patterson Gimlin film where that arm swing occurs, and the congruence is just remarkable.
Jeff was really impressed in that one spot where you see the arm swing, how when you do a side-by-side comparison with the Patterson Gimlin film,
the most famous and best piece of evidence to date, the similarities are striking.
Like the ratio, arm length, the swing, the shoulder, the muscle, everything. I mean, he was impressed with it. So that impresses me.
I'm Dr. Jeff Meldrum. I'm a professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University. Given the nature of this subject matter and the fact that so many of my academic colleagues kind of take a back seat when it comes to this type of research, that void is naturally filled by the amateur enthusiast. I like to refer to them actually as citizen scientists. I got a call from my secretary one time informing me that there was a FedEx box and it was dripping. Someone had taken their frozen scat sample and just simply stuck it in the box. And of course, by the time it arrived here, it had thawed out.
Hopefully, by the end of this, we'll be best friends.
Their foot is a little disproportionately long too, because they have a relatively longer heel, and part of because of that hinge, they increase leverage to manage that large body size by increasing the length of the heel. That spares the toes the bending stresses that have selected for shortening in human feet, and so their toes are really quite long. So when you look at Patty, you even get that sense. She looks kind of unusual in the way she's lifting her foot. Well, those are adaptations to clearing that somewhat longer foot,
There's
especially.
so much you can learn from just a footprint.
People ask me, what's the most convincing evidence? And I say,
Yeah.
well, it's all the footprints. Here are two footprints, two different individuals, two different regions, Northern California, southeastern Washington. 1967, 1980s, and yet you can see that remarkable similarity in that footprint, and even down to the subtleties of the anatomy then of the forefoot.
If you were just going to stomp a wooden
Yeah.
foot into the ground, I don't see how you would ever know enough. And
That's
I
right.
noticed you have actually what doesn't look like Sasquatch feet here.
That's right. Yeah,
What do you got here?
These are really different. This is thanks to Cliff Barrickman and their trip to Sumatra. Cliff has been sharing these with me. And you know, you can some of them you can even see still the imprints of the vegetation in the forest.
Yeah, that's cool.
And
Orang pendek.
That's right.
And how long ago did these live?
Oh no, these are not fossils. These are footprint casts.
There's a thing alive that's doing these.
Well, that's
right
the
now.
question. That's the question.
Okay, so this is a true real life thing.
given the tasks of evaluating anatomical evidence, footprints, the Patterson-Gimlin footage, and its 3D motion track reconstruction.
After analyzing the biomechanical issues of the Patterson footage, I find it very hard to believe that somebody in 1967 could have fabricated the intricacies as evidenced by the soft tissue irregularity that's seen on the upper leg. The study of biomechanics at that time was just far too primitive.
I've weighed and considered the evidence for a North American ape based on the Skookum body imprint, based on the Patterson film, based on hundreds of examined footprints. And I've now reached a point where it seems more incredible to consider all of this a series of spurious hoaxes spanning decades, if not centuries, than it is to entertain the likelihood that a new species of higher order ape may exist and may soon join the ranks of the family of primates.
Dermal ridges, better known as fingerprints. One of the best fingerprint experts in America is crime scene investigator Jimmy Chilcutt. He will examine casts of footprints for dermal ridge evidence to determine whether they were faked or whether they were caused by a known or unknown species.
My testimony puts people in jail, so I have to be very, very careful and very professional when I match a latent fingerprint to an ink print.
Chilcutt has fingerprinted every known great ape species. He'll use his unique skill and his catalog of primate material to examine and compare the best Sasquatch footprint casts available.
As a latent fingerprint examiner, I'm one of the few who is an expert in primate fingerprints, trying to determine gender and race through fingerprints, because primates don't interbreed like humans do, and try to find the key that would unlock the secrets of human prints. I will apply the same science to the Sasquatch castings as I do to a latent fingerprint lifted from a crime scene. My study group consisted of over 100 alleged Sasquatch castings. And some of these castings were cast as much as 20 years apart. And once I established the texture and the pattern flow of this animal, I was able to look at the other castings and know what I was looking at.
At the very least, Chilcutt should be able to tell us whether the prints are from a real animal or a clever forgery.
If this animal is walking through the wilderness, he's bound to come across rocks and rough terrain, which will cut the bottom of his foot. As the wound heals, the ridges curl inward toward the scar. So to authenticate any scar on these castings, I will be looking for that same characteristic. In human footprints, the ridges run horizontally across the width of the foot. On primates, the ridges run diagonally. On this casting, the ridges run vertically down the side of the foot. The ridges on this cast are about twice the thickness of a human print. Now, these casts were cast 20 years apart and hundreds of miles apart, yet they have the same ridge texture and ridge flow pattern.
Our fingerprint expert, Police Officer Jimmy Chilcutt, examined many footprint casts in an effort to find dermal ridge patterns that point to other known primates, a hoax or a new species.
I've come to the following solid conclusion. Number one, that there is a great ape living in North America. Number two, that the friction ridges of this great ape are not human nor known primate. This conclusion may come as a shock to some people, but I stake my reputation on it.
So people send you hairs,
right,
and they send them to you in hopes that you can identify whether they're bear or coyote.
Right. Our goal is to try to identify, well, first eliminate a hair as a possible Sasquatch hair by attributing it to something known, like a human or a chimpanzee or a brown bear. But we have these recurring examples of hair that don't readily lend themselves to attribution to some other common species.
And you have more than one of these.
Yeah, they all look like this. The shaft is parallel, it doesn't taper. There's even a pigment throughout, and there's no banding. I mean, those are all features of the guard hairs of mammals that help us to distinguish them to different species. They uniformly lack a cellular medulla. That is this central dark band
that characterizes so many mammals. It's a very distinguishing feature, but it's an unfortunate one because when we're trying to get DNA from a hair, a shed hair,
That's where you get it from.
That's where you get it.
I rely heavily on samples, specimens, photographs that are sent to my laboratory, to my office, for further examination.
Try and clear up an ancient mystery with the help of a prominent veterinarian who says she can prove that Bigfoot exists and that he's related to all of us. ABC's Nick Watt tracked her down.
He's elusive, almost human, a cornerstone of our mythology. And now someone is saying Harry and the Hendersons could actually be like a documentary? There's someone with a scientific background, a vet, who says Bigfoot is real and actually related to us humans.
Well, I was a skeptic. I did not believe these things existed at all prior to this study.
She's talking analysis of Sasquatch fur. After a 5-year study, more than 100 DNA samples, Dr. Melba Ketchum believes the species developed 15,000 years ago, a hybrid cross between Homo sapiens and an unknown primate.
Nobody has ever found another type of people that are living contemporary to us. I mean, they live right under our noses, and we never even were able to get proof of this until now.
Listen, there have been innumerable sightings. Some Sasquatch hunters have even deigned to speak to Conan O'Brien.
See, I know they exist.
You know he exists, and they exist. There's more than one Bigfoot.
They're a species. They're like a primate.
These are not just animals. These are a type of people. They don't want to be seen. They don't want to be found.
Okay, maybe it's too weird, but even the possibility, oh my goodness, I want to believe. Can you imagine if Bigfoot is actually real? For Good Morning America, Nick Watt, ABC News, New York.
Well, you never know. You know, it's too bad Rob Lowe, remember, he's here being a special guest host. Too bad he's not here because he's very excited about this Bigfoot news. He tweeted, "I have literally never been more excited than reading the latest news that Bigfoot may in fact be real." And check out the hashtag, not an ape suit.
Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, the abominable snowman, whatever you call it. There are several scientists, yes, scientists, they say they're scientists. They claim they have DNA evidence of its existence, and they say Sasquatch is part human. On top of that, the scientists are demanding all governments recognize the Squatches as indigenous people and protect their rights, and maybe even protect them from Bigfoot hunters.
Well, we found Bigfoot. Shut it down. Apologies to all of the skeptics. We did it, everybody. It is real. Trace and Anthony here for D-News and the Sasquatch Genome Project, a 5-year, $500,000 effort led by veterinarian Melba Ketchum, held a press conference in Dallas where they showed off what they say is video evidence of Bigfoot. Okay, Ketchum says they have DNA, hair, and blood samples from the Sasquatch.